Hey, y'all. Farmer Erin here. Welcome back to the Growing Space podcast. It's another great week of spring preparation around here. I don't know about you all, but I am like elbows deep in all of my spring planning at my own growing space, at home, with my individual clients that I'm working with at their homes, and also with the different businesses and community groups that I support with my weekly business client route. I am just starting to get a taste of the hustle and bustle of the spring season ahead. In this week's episode of the Growing Space podcast, I'm going to share with you a spring planting checklist in terms of the different things to be thinking about as you are preparing to plant your first round of new vegetables, fruits, herbs, etc. for the 2024 growing season. For those of you who are brand new to this podcast, first of all, welcome. Also, I am located in Charlotte, North Carolina. We are in the USDA Hardiness Zone 8A, meaning we have fairly mild winters and pretty hot, humid summers. But we are able to start planting our cool season vegetables, things that can survive being uncovered during light freezes and frost, starting now. Yeah, it's like the third week in February, and there are things that we can start planting now in preparation for the spring season. So, as we are getting ready and just amping up all of this momentum, this week's episode will help you feel confident and comfortable getting started for the spring season. I am super glad that you are here, and let's go ahead and get started talking about our spring planting checklist. Welcome to the Growing Space podcast. I'm your host, Farmer Erin, owner of the Patio Farmer, and I believe that no matter what size space you have, you can grow food at home. Tune in every Tuesday as I share my best tips, tricks, and encouragement for tending to homegrown edible plants. I'm here to support your food growing journey. The Growing Space podcast is sponsored by Plant Club by the Patio Farmer. Plant Club by the Patio Farmer is a monthly subscription service I started in 2020. It's a membership-based opportunity to take your growing journey to the next level. With 4 different membership options, you get to decide the amount and kind of support that's right for you. All Plant Club members receive access to my online community through a platform called Circle. Having access to this platform allows members to share pictures, ask questions, celebrate harvests, and get to know each other. All Plant Club members also have access to free seeds each month, along with information on how to plant and tend to their crops, with seeding instructions and downloadable resources from the Patio Farmer's Resource Library. Membership starts at just $14 a month. Join Plant Club today by visiting my website, thepatiofarmer.com/membership. Before we get too in the weeds on today's episode, I do just want to mention and call out that I have decided to create a masterclass. Yes, an online masterclass. It's called the 6 S's to Success. It's a fantastic alliteration. I always sound kind of like a little black rat snake when I say that. The 6 S's to Success. I am working on finalizing this masterclass that I'm going to share out into the world. It's going to launch and be live on the first day of spring. So for those of you who don't know, our spring equinox is March 19th. That's a Tuesday. Go ahead, put it in your calendar. It's a virtual class. You will have access to the course materials for 6 months. So it's really designed to help you get started growing. You'll have plenty of downloadable resources and guides that are shared as part of the masterclass that are yours to keep. You can hold on to those and reference those forever. Like they are yours, your gift. And signing up for the class are all of the downloadable course materials, which includes the slide deck that I'll be speaking from, tools that I have created, like walking you through the 30 most common homegrown edible plants and how to plant them, tend them, harvest them, kind of a full compilation of my maintenance plans that I write for clients. You also get my 2024 planning calendar and lots of other good stuff is tucked in as downloadable tools for you to support you in your food growing journey. So there's going to be 8 self-paced modules that you can listen to as part of this masterclass. The first one is going to just give you an introduction to the course and help with goal setting for this year. Then we're going to dig in right away to each of the 6 S's. So we have sun, space, soil, season, seed, and supervision. Those are the 6 S's to success for growing food at home. So we'll walk through each of those different components and I'll give you the full rundown. Like this is the total download of information in my brain on these different components to success for home food growing. And then the 8th and final module within this course is going to be a conclusion, a wrap up, and helping you prepare for the next steps in your food growing journey. I've been dreaming about creating this course now for several months, and this is the time. This is the time to release this out into the world, document all of this knowledge, and share it with you. So if you are interested in getting on the wait list for my masterclass, the 6 S's to Success, I'm going to share a link in today's show notes, so be sure to check that out. You can also visit my website, thepatiofarmer.com/masterclass. It has tons of information on there about the course itself. There's also an FAQ section on my website and the link to sign up for that waitlist. If you sign up for the waitlist, then you get to join a unique and exclusive kickoff launch event on Monday, March 18th. So it's the official last day of winter. We will turn the page together, and I might just throw in a special little bonus for you for being on the wait list and joining the pre-launch event on the 18th. It'll be in the evening from 6 to 7. You can pop in and hear more details and be among the first to have access to my brand new masterclass. So anyway, I just wanted to give you all, my podcast listeners, a preview of that and what all I have planned for March. I have so much planned for March, to be honest with you, but that is something that anyone, anywhere can benefit from and just feel all of that excitement for the spring season coming with this masterclass. The 6 S's to Success. Say that 5 times fast. Anyway, super excited. Now, let's dig in and talk all about this spring planting checklist, shall we? Last week's episode was all about building new raised beds for spring. Like I mentioned last week, this is something that has come up over and over again in the consultations that I've been having with people already this month. And it's the perfect time to be thinking about your space and any modifications that you might want to make to it before you start planting in 2024. So the first thing on the spring checklist is to assess your space, right? Take a look at it and think to yourself, like, did you end your last growing season feeling like you had enough space to work with? Would you have benefited from something like a trellis for some of your vegetables or fruits last year? How do you feel about composting? Like, are you already composting? Are you interested in starting to compost? Is that something that you want to add to your space? Also, if you are interested in starting things from seed inside, what kinds of materials, what kinds of things, what kinds of infrastructure do you need to start shopping for and start gathering to be successful in growing this spring? So if you're interested in adding beds, listen to last week's episode. If you feel like you need a trellis, there's tons of different trellis options out there. So depending on the space that you have to work with will help to dictate what kind of trellising system you might need. I love using just like folding A-frame trellises, or an archway trellis is super dreamy and super trendy right now in the gardening world. Like if you see on Instagram all of those beautiful archway trellises with like lovely cherry tomatoes growing up them and around them, and you have dreams of standing underneath your archway trellis and just like, picking some snap peas, or I don't know, something like a cucumber. Maybe it's time to add an archway trellis. If I'm being totally honest with you, I am adding an archway trellis to my space this spring, and I can't wait. Composting. I also added a brand new composting system this spring because 3 different composting systems was just not enough for me. I needed a 4th. If you are interested in starting seeds inside, this is something that we are focusing on this month in Plant Club, which is my monthly membership subscription service. We are growing tomatoes from seed at home inside this month in preparation for planting later this year, probably in April or May. So if you are interested in adding an indoor seeding setup, feel free to join Plant Club. If you join Plant Club before the 23rd, which is this Friday, February 23rd, then I can hook you up with one of those grow kits for starting tomatoes inside from seed. But that's the first thing on your spring checklist, is to take an inventory of all of your infrastructure in your growing space and decide what you need to tweak, what you need to add. And maybe you are like looking at all of the space that you have to fill this season and you're feeling a little overwhelmed, Maybe just planning on planting in half of your space for the spring season and saving the rest for the summer season. It's great. So that's the first thing on your spring checklist, is to just take an inventory of your infrastructure, make any necessary changes, and decide how much space you're going to plant for the spring season. The next thing on your spring planting checklist is to make your crop selection. Make a list of all the things that you want to grow. And as you're doing that, go ahead and map out where you want those things to be planted or to be sown in your growing space. If I am totally honest with you, this is something that I usually do in my head. Like I think about all of the different things that I personally want to grow in my growing space. Then I accumulate them. And then I have them in front of me in my hands, and I'm out in my space and I'm setting plants where they're going to go. Now, I do have a fairly unique vantage point for this planning process because I have a whole stash of seeds right next to me right now for all of my clients and customers who order from me through my online store. I also have a partnership with a local farm here in the Charlotte area that I get tons and tons of plants from. So for me, I have these materials already at my home and ready to be put into my growing space whenever I'm ready. You, on the other hand, probably, I'm assuming here, maybe I'm incorrect, but you probably don't have all of those things waiting for you right at home. So being able to write down the things that you want to grow, maybe even drawing a picture of your growing space and figuring out, okay, like in this bed, I'm going to put kale and green onions and some nasturtiums. And in this bed, I'm going to do carrots and radish and a calendula, or, just creating that map for yourself and figuring out where you want all of the things to go this season. So the next thing on the spring checklist is to know where you're going to go to get all of your seeds and your plants and the materials. My go-to always is supporting small businesses, independent retailers in your community who are producing and sourcing responsibly. And maybe they have an eye towards more natural practices or more organic growing. But really, that's up to you and how you are maintaining your growing space and your plants. That will dictate the materials and supplies that you seek out. But by default, I always go to independent and local retailers first. I'll link this in today's show notes, but I have 2 blog posts written on my website. Oh, and shameless plug for the podcast. I have 2 podcast episodes all about sourcing products and materials. One episode is all about my favorite seed companies, and the other one features Charlotte area retailers. And then I have matching blog posts for those episodes. So I will link the blog posts. And if you're interested in hearing more about my favorite retailers and seed companies, then you can go back through the episodes and check for those 2. One more plug, and then I promise I'm done. In last week's episode, I mentioned that I was going to open up my online store for ordering, and it's officially open. So check out my website as well. If you are interested in ordering seeds and seedlings and other materials from me, I have shipping available on some of those, but check my website for all of that information. And if you want to support me this spring season, then I would be more than happy to get you the supplies and materials that will help you be successful in your growing journey this year. Just to recap the different checklist items that we have covered so far. First is to take stock of your current inventory, your current growing space, make any changes that you would like to before the spring season hits. Then it's crop selection and mapping where all the things are going to go in your growing space. Then understanding where are you going to get your materials from and what local businesses will you support this year for your growing practice. Then you can set a planting date. Oh boy, it's so exciting. Now, I have made a resolution this year, and I feel like this is very well supported in the fact that the USDA just updated their hardiness zone map at the end of last year. And surprise, surprise, the climate is warming and we can all start planting our seasonal vegetables earlier this year than we did last year. In my growing journey and in my growing practice this year, I'm going to try to push myself to plant as early as possible, which if you know me, I generally run maybe about 5 minutes behind schedule. It's just my nature. I really struggle with being early. So this year, it's really pushing myself to be early in my planting. But, I might just plant my entire spring growing space this weekend. I don't know. That feels really early, which probably means that's when I need to plant. In Zone 8A, for those of you in the Charlotte area, my recommendation would be to plant sometime between now, so mid to late February, and mid to late March. You have about 3 to 4 weeks. Now, this timing specifically is for those of us who want to plant both spring and summer vegetables. This planting time frame will allow you to get your spring veggies planted, started growing, so that they mature with plenty of time and flexibility before it's time to plant your summer vegetables, which are things like tomatoes and cucumbers and squash and basil, and all of those lovely little plants that we can begin planting at the end of April. Also, your planting date will or could be earlier depending on how much space you have and how much of that space you are dedicated to planting for spring. If you're like me and you always fill every opportunity you have with an edible plant every season, then you want to be on the earlier end of that planting time frame. If you are thinking maybe you would plant like 3/4 of your growing space or less in spring vegetables and leave open, the remaining part of your growing space for those early summer vegetables, then you have a little bit more flexibility. Basically, what you're trying to avoid is being in a time crunch and feeling hurried or rushed with your spring vegetables, waiting for them to mature, waiting to get all your harvests in, and feeling like you have to make decisions like pulling out plants to make room for new things. You want to make sure that you give yourself at least 2 months of growing fast, quick to mature spring vegetables before it's time for the next season, essentially. The next item on our spring checklist is to create a plan for your soil amending. So this is something, especially coming off of the winter season, amending your soil. If you're using, a soil that you have used in previous seasons, this is really important and essential to have as part of your spring checklist. And what do I mean by soil amending? So I have people ask me all the time, which is always a curiosity to me, but I do get asked quite frequently if you can reuse your soil from season to season. These are mainly people who are growing in containers or raised beds, but they ask if they can use the same soil over and over again. And the answer is yes, unless there's something catastrophic that has happened to your soil, which, I'm not going to say doesn't happen ever, because you can definitely run into situations where you do need to replace your soil, but it's not super common that you would need to replace your soil either in containers or in your raised beds. Instead, what you can do is you can add things to your soil to reinvigorate the nutrient content, to improve drainage, to help support a new round of healthy plant growth. So when we talk about amending our soil, that's what we mean. We mean adding delicious ingredients. Yes, I said delicious. Delicious ingredients to our existing soil to get the nutrients back up to a good level for growing whatever it is that you're planning on growing this season. So typically, my approach for amending soil from season to season is adding a really high quality, well-cured compost. Sometimes this is compost that I have made myself. Other times this is store-bought. If you use compost that you have made at home, make sure that your compost has rested or you haven't added any new material to your compost system in 60 to 90 days. 90 days would be super safe, and 60 days, depending on how warm your space gets, could be sufficient. But you want your compost, your homemade compost, to be totally broken down and well cured. If you add compost to your soil that hasn't fully broken down or isn't fully cured, then it can actually borrow nutrients and borrow resources from your plants that you're planting and trying to grow successfully. So homemade compost, make sure it's ready to go. If you use store-bought compost, I really like using mushroom compost. This is one of the only things that I recommend getting from a big box store like Lowe's or Home Depot. Mushroom compost is great. And then I also really love using earthworm castings as a source of compost for my plants. Those two are probably my favorite. And I tend to go for less animal-derived compost products in my space. I mean, I know earthworms are animals, but their waste is not as scented, shall we say, as black cow, which is cow manure. And the reason for that is simply because I have dogs. That's it. They're animals too, and they love certain things with certain smells, and I do not enjoy the mess. So I usually go for more plant-based or, with mushroom compost, more fungal-based, if you will, soil amendments. So typically I will grab some compost, homemade or store-bought, and I add a nice layer of that to all of my raised beds. And I put a couple handfuls of compost in all of my containers and pots as well. And Usually what I'm shooting for is about an inch, maybe 2 inches of fresh compost on top of a raised bed that is, about 15 inches in depth. So I have 15 inches of existing soil to about an inch or two of compost. Then I will add an all-purpose plant food. So my favorite plant food to use is a certified organic, plant-based mix from the farm that I work with to get plants and seedlings from. And it's called Compost Complete by Windcrest Farm. And it's delightful. Like I said, it is all plant-based. So it's safe if you're a vegan household, you can use that. If you don't live in the Charlotte area, you can find vegan plant foods online. I will actually put some links to some of my favorite plant-based plant foods that you can shop for wherever you are in today's show notes for you. So in addition to the compost layer, I like to do just a little bit of plant food. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you a more well-rounded nutritional base for your soil. Compost is fantastic, but it typically only provides a strong dose of nitrogen to your soil. But plants also need some of those other minerals, some of those other macronutrients that are found in a all-purpose, well-rounded plant food. And you can find plant foods that are certified organic. You can find them that are vegan. You can find whatever parameters you're looking for in your plant food. You can find a product that's right for you. And like I mentioned, I will put links to my favorite plant foods in today's show notes. But that is the 5th item on our spring checklist. And then finally, our last item for your spring planting checklist is to have a plan for watering. In the cooler seasons, you don't have to water every day, but you should plan on watering maybe every other day or at least twice a week for any season, really. But your priority for watering should always be on areas that you have direct seeded. So areas where you have planted a seed in the place where it is going to grow to maturity. It's really important that those top couple inches, really like the top inch or two of soil, does not dry out as those little baby seeds are trying to germinate. They need lots of resources and they need lots of love and attention as they are getting started. So make sure you have a plan, whether that's looking at your 10-day forecast and identifying the gaps in rain or days that are maybe unseasonably warm, because we're all experiencing those. So just kind of mapping out days where you think to yourself, oh, I should really make sure I water this day. Or, oh, we have a period of, 2 or 3 days where it's going to rain a lot. Maybe I should plant before this period of rain so that all of my seeds get nice and watered in and soaked in after that rain. So you could look at the 10-day forecast and kind of like map out when you should be watering. Usually in the spring is when we can turn on our irrigation systems again. A couple of years ago, I invested in an automatic irrigation system for my growing space, and it's a bit of a game changer. I really enjoy it. I also have 10 raised beds and I don't know, at least 50 pots. So it takes me a long time to water. If you have an irrigation system set up for your growing space, but you do not want your irrigation system to run if there's a chance of a frost or a freeze, because that can just honestly cause more problems than it's really worth having your irrigation system going if there's a risk of freezing temperatures. So make sure you have a plan for watering, whether it's hand watering for the first couple weeks that things are planted, or just having days selected where you're going to be extra mindful and make some extra time to make sure that your plants are getting what they need, or monitoring the lows, the nighttime lows, and running your automatic irrigation system. Whatever it may be, just make sure you have a plan and that you're mindful about watering. Okay? So that was the last item for the checklist. And, like I said, this is just a quick rundown of the different things to be keeping in mind as you are approaching your spring planting. It's very exciting. So I am super excited for all of you and this new growing season. And I can't wait to see and hear updates from your growing space. It's just such a great time of year. Okay, so if you have listened to this podcast before, then you will know that at the end of every episode, I share a fun fact or a little morsel of information with you. And this week's fun fact and tidbit is all about hummingbirds. So, fun fact about Erin. I love hummingbirds. I don't know if it's their bright colors or the fact that they're so teeny tiny, or maybe it's their long, pointy bill, or the fact that they love bright, beautiful flowers. I don't know. I am just so mesmerized by hummingbirds. And over the last couple years, I have tried so hard to attract them to my growing space. I have hummingbird feeders out. Last year, I did have a lot of hummingbirds on my crimson bee balm that I have planted in my front flower bed. And that just brought so much joy to my heart. When you look at a hummingbird, it doesn't stop moving, right? Like its little wings are just going so fast, and it really does hum. And that humming is coming from how fast its wings are going. And I found this fact recently while I was traveling, and I was in a place where I could see and witness so many hummingbirds. I actually even saw like a baby hummingbird in its nest, which was really precious and sweet. And so I've just been on like this hummingbird kick, which you can probably tell because of my tangent right now. But here's your fun fact. Hummingbirds flap their wings 70 times per second. 70 wing beats per second for this little hummingbird, over 4,000 times in a minute. Isn't that crazy? It's no wonder they survive on nectar. They need it to be able to flap their wings that fast. In next week's episode, I am going to share with you how you can grow $1,000 worth of produce on your patio. Yep. $1,000 in 1 year, this year, if you want, on your patio. And if you are planting your spring growing space this week, then have fun and enjoy the process. Thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of the Growing Space Podcast. I hope that you learned something new and that you were able to take this new information home with you and implement into your growing journey and into your growing space. As always, I am here to support you and your food growing journey. If you'd like to learn more about the different services and resources and membership programs that I run through the Patio Farmer, please check out my website, thepatiofarmer.com. You can also follow me on social media. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and oh my gosh, most recently, TikTok. Wow. I know. Here I am. Patio Farmer is on TikTok. It's very exciting. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like or a rating or a review if you want. Maybe share a little comment about your favorite part of the episode. Share it with a friend. The more interactions I get with my little podcast online, the more I'm able to help people just like you in their food growing journeys. As always, thanks for being here, and I will see you again next week.